Big Pharma partnering deal. In the next 45, 50 minutes or so, we're going to use our 50 years of partnering experience, combined individually, to tell you how to drive a deal with pharma in 90 days or less. Actually, no, we're probably not. See, I want to get everyone's attention on the panel. We're probably not going to do that. But what we're actually going to do is discuss some of the basics in our experience with really just getting that first introduction and getting that first meeting and some of the content of the first meeting. And I think also importantly, because deals don't happen in 90 days, how to maintain that relationship in a way that's meaningful and helpful to the partner that you're trying to work with. If we have time, which we probably won't, we can also talk about deal structures and what to expect from an actual deal, and especially in our respective companies. I'm Chris Haskell. I run Bayer's Open Innovation Center here in San Francisco. But I'd like to have the other panelists running on the line here introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about what they're looking for at their company, and also give me a trend they're seeing in the last 5 years and why it's important for partnering.
So I guess I'm starting.
Yes,
hi, I'm Jennifer Ma. I work at Novartis, but I work at sort of what we call the Novartis Institute of Biomedical Research in the Cambridge, which is headquartered in Cambridge. So NIBR is what we consider the discovery and early development engine for Novartis. We have over $1 billion in R&D budget, primarily to essentially fill the pipeline for our late-stage colleagues. So all of the early stuff comes through NIBR. And I would say, what do we do, what do we not do? It's probably easier to talk about what Novartis doesn't do. I would say we divested infectious disease. We are not specifically in women's health, but outside of that, ophthalmology, autoimmune, pretty much we are still a fully diversified pharmaceutical company. Unlike some of our peers that are specialized, we are big in oncology. And I think that you can also sort of see through the recent M&A activities that we are also thinking really hard about modalities outside of your traditional small molecules and antibodies. Obviously we're in cell and gene therapy. We have done a number of deals in AI, and also looking at sort of the ADC through the medicine company that we acquired, and also the medicine company is the antisense. But basically we are sort of actively exploring a lot of new modalities in terms of bringing medicine to patients. The focus for NIBR is really patient and science focused. So we try very hard to be on the cutting edge of scientific innovations, and we understand that we are at a stage where there's significant risk in terms of the deals that we do and the risks that we take. But we try very hard to kind of work on deals that could really be transformative for patients.
Any trends you're seeing in the last 5 years, any you observed you think is important or is exciting?
I think that we kind of covered some of the trends, right? These kind of antisense, AV, cell and gene. There seems to be this resurgence in interest in orphan diseases, which I think is kind of bringing on a lot of discussions about reimbursements and challenges in pricing, etc. I'm
sure we'll also get to that more.
I think the IPO market, it's been really kind of good to the biotechs over the last couple of years, and it's kind of made it really interesting from a deal-making perspective. I think that we probably are doing deals earlier than we have historically been doing because of sort of alternative sources of funding and exit strategies for the biotech companies. So that would be one of the deal trends that we are seeing. Whereas I think historically we'll be looking for things that are more mature. We talk a lot about value inflection points that are sort of like in the clinic, etc. But depending on the project, we are, I think we're getting accustomed to this idea of structuring the deals to reflect the risk that we're taking. It's probably just the best way to say it.
Hey, good morning. I'm Scott Dwyer. I lead immuno-oncology business development and licensing for Boehringer Ingelheim. My own personal background is that I'm trained as a PhD pharmacologist. And prior to having worked at Boehringer, where I spent time in research and on the BD side, I was an entrepreneur. So I've been on the roller coaster ride we've been on, and co-founded a company and rode that through to IPO, and then came to work here on the buy side at Boehringer. We are a little bit different from a lot of other top 20 pharmas in that we're privately held by a single family. And so it's a little bit of a differentiating factor for us in terms of the ability to set long-term strategy, management turnover, things like that. In oncology, specifically, I can talk about what we're looking for. The company makes drugs you might be familiar with, such as Jardiance, Ofev, Spiriva, Gelatrip. But in oncology, what I'm looking for in deals is cancer vaccine space, oncolytic viruses, myeloid modulators, and T-cell engagers. Trends I'm seeing. I guess on the science side, one thing is an appreciation that fibrosis is playing such a role across TAs for respiratory, immunology, and oncology, and even retinopathy in other areas. And then in terms of deal making, something I'm seeing more often these days is equity investment alongside partnering. So build to buy becoming more popular for more companies, and companies requesting co-equity investment for partnership.
Good morning. My name is Larry Tsai. I represent Fosun Pharma in the Boston area. And first of all, I'd like to thank RESI and to invite me. And I don't know how I got on this Big Pharma panel, because compared to the four other panelists and companies they represent, we're really small in terms of the sales. But I think the qualifier for us is we're relatively big in China, among the top 10 if depend on different metrics you look at it. So I feel like, okay, maybe I can provide some different perspective in that regard, especially in the deal making cross-border aspect. So that's the first thing I want to make that clear. And also, Fosun Pharma it's been around for 25 years and public traded in both Shanghai and Hong Kong stock exchanges. And like most of the Chinese pharmaceutical companies, they basically grow to today's size through manufacturing and selling of generics. So to jump to the question of the trend it's just in China right now, with all the reforms going on, there is almost like an insatiable appetite for innovative assets to work on this, also to tap the market, because there's the demand. And I just say that because of the, we look at the past 4 decades since the Chinese policy of open door and reform, the average life expectancies have increased about 20 years. It's just with that, it comes with all different types of medical needs, so really have that need for that. And then there's, with the economic growth, and there is the capital available to make some deals, and then at least to tap into the China market per se, not quite yet ready for the global stage, but for terms of especially late clinical stage asset is primarily for regional deals in China. And as far as I also look at the preclinical, and that one we can, because of the longer runway, we can look at the global rights and those kind of collaborations. What else? I think that's in a nutshell, and glad to be here.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Joyce Chan, and I'm a director of our external R&D group at Amgen. And for the last 5 years, I've been leading our search and evaluation interests in the therapeutic areas of cardiovascular, metabolism, nephrology, bone, and neurosciences. So what I'm telling everybody is everything but inflam and onc at Amgen within BD. And the first 10 years of my tenure at Amgen, I was a preclinical pharmacologist and a cardiovascular research TA, so my background is scientific. In terms of trends that I'm seeing, if we think about indications, Obviously, the IO and oncology field is still very hot, but very, very difficult, I think, to make a difference nowadays. It's so saturated. There's always going to be a love-hate relationship with certain very difficult indications such as cardiovascular disease as well as neurosciences. So we've been seeing, including our own company, decisions to step out of certain disease indications to try to go for something that apparently looks less risky. So we can certainly talk about that in my own personal opinions. Definitely more risk-taking on new modalities outside of the current toolbox, the standard toolbox, small molecules, large molecules. A lot more clinical data now on the siRNA and ASO space, so I think there's a lot more growing confidence overall in that particular modality. We'll have to see how the long-term safety data looks for the various disease indications that those modalities are pursuing. Obviously, there's more appetite for it in those diseases where orphan indications are ones that have no current therapy, so there's more appetite there. And I think finally, in terms of geographies, as Larry pointed out, there's certainly more appreciation for the various companies to really think about our geographic landscape and trying to transact on deals outside of the U.S. Obviously China is a big focus, including for ourselves with our deal last year that we transacted with Beijing. So those are probably the trends for now.
Thanks. Thanks, everyone. So as I mentioned, I'm with Bayer. I run our West Coast Innovation Center, which is one of 5 we have around the world. At each of these centers, we look at partnering in both academic and for the early startup stage in all the therapeutic areas for Bayer, which is oncology, women's health, ophthalmology, and cardiovascular. And cardiovascular includes lung, pulmonology, as well as hemostasis. At Bayer, we have over 60% of our clinical pipeline is some way partnered for development. And I would say this is a testament to the fact that we are being very creative in terms of how we're developing partnerships and the types of approaches we'll take to make sure that we're meeting the needs of both sides. And this carries forward also to our early partnership models too. I can talk some about the incubator collaborator we have globally, as well as some of the other models. In terms of trends, I think that as Joyce and Scott also mentioned, you heard a lot about new modalities coming out. Especially in cell and gene therapies, we're seeing, I think, a real democratization of the ability for people to develop therapeutics. Rather than having sort of an army of chemists developing small molecule agents, you're seeing that relatively small groups of scientists can bring things very far forward into proof of concept and validation. And from the partnering side of things, that's very exciting for us because we're seeing some very advanced science that's in many ways leading towards curative, if not for significantly impacting the patient in the end. So with that, thank you everyone, and we'll now get down to some of the details. So you don't get a second chance to make a first impression, and that is also true when you're presenting your company and your idea to a pharma partner. So anyone, I'll open, I don't want to go on the line for all these questions, I'll let anyone on the panel talk a little bit about the do's and don'ts, or what they see about the best way to make contact with a pharma partner, maybe who the right person is to contact, or maybe some real bombs you've seen in terms of first impressions, people that really have gone off the wrong foot, some warning signs.
Bombs are fun.
Yeah, exactly. It's more fun to hear how people have done wrong.
It keeps you awake.
Exactly.
It's easier to talk about don'ts, but I think let's start positively, and I'm sure all of the groups here probably have very similar type of processes where we have our website, obviously, that you can go to be able to submit your pitch idea. On that note, don't send us a laundry list of your patents. I do not have time to read a herd of patent information. So, you want to be concise, you want to be credible. That's something that we can talk about more and expand upon when we actually have face-to-face. But at Amgen, we're actually pretty good about if you reach out to me or any of the other so-called prospectors at my company, in spite of the fact that I may not cover your therapeutic area, I'm very quick to be able to get your ideas in front of my colleagues. So be sure that, it's going to get to the right person. It will be looked at in hopefully a timely manner, and each of our prospectors basically consult with our R&D heads. And obviously, depending on the stage of your program, if it's a preclinical stage, discovery stage program, pre-IND, then the champions that are going to be reviewing your project are going to be in the research stage. Likewise, if it's a clinical program, then I'm going to be bringing in clinical development people that are specific to the therapeutic area that you're trying to address. So I'll just leave that and then let the rest of the team talk.
Yeah, I'll jump off of a couple of those points. So yeah, like everybody else, we have a partnering portal online, but honestly, I don't recommend using it.
I'm sorry.
Maybe hers works that
We're
way.
good.
We've had this open maybe 2 years, and it's an ongoing experiment for us, but I find it's just filled with junk. And so it's the last place I go when I have time in my day to look through things. So maybe, yeah, that's what you're going to get from me. I would instead go to the partner in contact who is most appropriate at that company and get their email address and hit them directly, or try to find them on LinkedIn and hit them directly. And when you do, you mentioned concise.
Yes.
I can't say that enough. Capture your value proposition as concisely as you can. And if you're going to send a pitch deck across 10 slides, very brief. State what it is, why it's important, what your special sauce is, why we couldn't have done it ourselves, why nobody else has the advantage you have, and then we can have time for patents, we can have time for data later, but just to make sure we can take a look at that, very quickly assess all the things that are important to us. Strategic fit, is this an indication that we like to treat? Is this a modality that we're feeling we have a competitive advantage in? Is the stage something that fits our portfolio needs? And we can get a good sense of the market size. You don't need to do that for us. All those things, just what is it that you do that nobody else can do? State that to us in that first impression. And that's what's most important to me. Everything else builds from there, because if it's a go from our side, we're going to be reaching back out to you for more information.
So let me comment a little bit about this concept of being concise. So we too have a partnering portal, and like Joyce, we also we have a very sorry, I'm not supposed to hold it. Okay. We too have a partnering portal, and like Joyce, we have a very small team. We know exactly who covers what, so we can very quickly get your company's presentations or proposals in front of the right team, and these search and validation leads for their various disease areas, they are in regular touch, like definitely weekly, if not daily touch with their disease area scientific leads. So we can get a very quick read on sort of our overall level of interest. I do think we get a lot of crap in our partner portals. We do try our best to try to triage and go through them. And so on that note, it's this concept of being concise. I really do think that for a lot of entrepreneurs, they kind of build what they think is like the perfect slide deck. And I think that kudos to you guys, right? But when you build your first slide deck, you're thinking, I'm pitching to this investor. Well, guess what? You should be writing a different slide deck for Big Pharma. Maybe not just for Novartis, but for those of us here, we probably do the same slide deck, right? But what would be really, so I think my first advice to you guys about how to be concise is, who is your audience? You need to understand who your audience is, understand what their business needs or their sort of scientific interests might be, and you need to very, very quickly get to the point. I think many of us introduced ourselves, so I too am trained as an organic chemist. We are scientifically trained. So, and I don't know sort of what your typical early stage, seed stage investors are. Oftentimes they are also very scientifically trained, but the investor's lens is slightly different from our lens, right? The investor's lens is, what's my return on investment? How do I exit in 3 to 5 years, okay? As a pharmaceutical company, my exit strategy is selling the product to the patient. Selling a product that works, that's creating value. And so my lens is really about how validated is the science, do I believe that there is an unmet medical need? And so because of the different lens, I would say oftentimes I get slide decks that, wow, if I was an investor, this is pretty well drafted, but like you've got 10 slides in there that I don't even care about, right? And what I care about is quickly, what is the scientific narrative, and getting to the data pretty quickly. And I think that will, help you be concise, because, I really kind of lose it by the time I'm in the slide number 15. I'm not paying close enough attention, right? And so we are triaging through a lot of inbound requests. We do our best to be thoughtful, but making our job easy for us is something that you can do to really kind of make sure that you get the right audience in front of you. So.
If I may add a few points, both Scott and Joyce mentioned one keyword is the IP, and I can't emphasize enough. And you talk about, Fosun is the China-based company, it's an international company, but any project needs to have a China angle, and that anchor actually is the IP in China. Things, with all that, PCT and all that, but coming to a national stage and also really getting branded is a lot more important than how many you file. And that's just so we have done. We have gone through a process both with late stage and also early stage, and then get the bottleneck or the gate check is the IP. Really, if you don't have that in China, it's basically a no-go for us. Not saying some other company would not take on that from China, but for Fosun, the key is the IP of any innovative programs. And another thing I think that Scott mentioned is finding the right contact. I think this is even more so for Fosun. For those of you who are not familiar with Fosun, Fosun has 3 pillars. It's a health, wealth, and happiness, and they have different angles of looking at type of things. And Jennifer said, your deck may be good for investors, and Fosun has the Fosun Healthcare. That's purely look at the financial return. As far as Fosun Pharma, our goal is to make a product onto the market to help the patient. So when we look at it, whether it's the pitch or the thing, the exit strategy, you look at it, it's a bit of a different lens.
So there, you have a web portal where you can put in ideas for happiness?
We'll discuss that as well.
So happiness, you can just go Qingdao Beer, Club Med, Cirque du Soleil, and we already invested in those.
Okay, good to know. One of the examples that we've noted that is a really bad start is if you somehow craftily decode how our emails are how you reach certain people on coming with email, and then by emailing your proposition from everyone from the head of pharma to everyone in BD, that doesn't make people happy.
No.
But we tend to get on the front lines as a bunch of senior managers saying, fix this, please, anyway, so don't do that. When I got into this, and I think all of us are scientists, when I got into the end of this side of the business, one of my first thoughts was how inefficient this was, and I kind of wish it was more like eBay, where you could, search for the topic and see the ratings of your partners and things like that. It's not like that, right? I think what you heard from everyone here is there's three really key points, and the first one is to make sure you do your homework and understand, how to reach the company and make sure that your value proposition is in their areas. You're not wasting people's time. And the second one is that this is really a people business. No matter how fancy the websites are, it's getting to people. And if you can get to the people up front and around the website, then that's the right thing to do. Most of these people are scientists at heart, and most of these people are really busy. So, tailoring and having the right content, which is the third part here, is really important. Having the data, making sure you show data. You can't be in stealth mode when you're trying to pitch to a pharma, because it doesn't work. We have to be able to evaluate the science. So building on that theme there, what you also sort of heard here is often, given this is a people business and that you're interacting with people, often we're at the sort of the front lines, especially if we're in innovation centers or remote from the partnering or our science groups, we're often acting as your advocate. And what you're trying to do is actually create a partner in us, and often we're working with you to try to convince our own organization that this is something worth taking forward. So I don't know if any of you have had that experience where you sort of think that the science you're seeing with the partner is so good and you can't get anyone in your own organization to come to the fountain with you and understand this. What can the external partner do to sort of help you in this way? Because that's often the way it starts.
So I can take an example of a couple years ago when we put together a deal with a small company for our first venture into the siRNA space. And I can tell you that, Amgen had obviously been using siRNA as a tool molecule, right, for proof of concept in preclinical studies, but hadn't really thought about how we were going to jump into that arena using that modality for a therapeutic. And so this also speaks to, I think, Chris, when you were talking about deals not getting done in 90 days. Relationships, you have a first contact. Hopefully it's one that's, it's a good, credible contact. I'm going to remember you. I'm going to remember that you have a good scientific basis in your thinking, and that it may take months, it may take years, unfortunately, to build that relationship, build the science that you have, build your package, such that when we're exploring new modalities, for example, and our biggest issue is perhaps the safety of it, that you just don't know. And you have to build that package, and you have to do those preclinical studies and work with me, and hopefully I'll be continuing to be your advocate within the company and keep seeding the idea to my leadership, and that eventually there will be a turning point where we're like, okay, let's have this discussion. This is ripe enough or mature enough, or maybe we have some internal data that also fits along with what you guys are doing, but we recognize that you are bringing something to the table that we do not have internally. That's one example. So again, that kind of speaks to the length of the relationship and continuing to build that partnership and staying in touch. And I love it when, every 6 months I get a phone call or an email saying, hey, we have some more interesting data. Do you want to have a chit chat? Absolutely, let's hear about it.
So honestly, do you keep a list of people you reach out to?
Yes.
Okay.
Honestly, I do.
That's fine. Because that's actually, that's a hard habit to actually maintain.
Yes.
And you don't often get calls back from the pharma.
Really?
There's always
So we are your advocate and scientifically, if I'm interested, we've known each other for a long time. So, if I'm interested, I'm going to remember, hey, this is a target that I'm interested in.
But it's usually a pretty small list, I would say.
Absolutely.
Yeah, my list is 2 or 3 long, but there's a bigger list that's in between that, and that is the companies that hit me intermittently that are on my watch list.
Yes.
The companies that, as Joyce said, over the past couple of years I've built a relationship with. And I'll tell a brief story. It's a deal I didn't get. I won't name what the company is, but a 2.5-year process when they first came to me was just basically a value proposition in a 10 micromolar compound. And over a period of 2 years of meeting with them, I kept giving lots of advice and saying, I'm your advocate with NDI, and I need to see you run this in vitro study, and then I need to see you run this histology, and then I need to see you run this model. And they put a beautiful package together.
So you're their consultant.
But the story is that, we are on your team, and I think the quicker that we realize that together, and then, we're helping you build a better value proposition for yourself and your company, because we want to have partnership there, but then you also, that's portable to other places. And just appreciation that, we're not here to be critical, just to be mean. It's to build strength and to address some sort of risk that we see. One thing I just want to say while I have the mic, I heard a don't copying in the leadership of the research over and over. Please don't do this. And if we give you a polite decline, don't write back to somebody else in the organization asking for a rebuttal or an appeal of that. Definitely no faster way to make the meeting person not like you.
It's kind of like asking mom and then asking dad.
Is there something to the fact that the more detailed response you get, especially on scientific or business level, the more interested the partner is? So if you're on a small company, you sort of get just like not really interested, doesn't differentiate, something very general or too early, with nothing else. Is that a sign that the interest level sort of is a 1 to 5, 1 to 4, 1 to 10? But if you get really specific feedback, like, hey, we really like what you're doing, but if you have this, model, whatever model for fibrosis or whatever, that's what would differentiate. Is that a sign to the company that this is, they can sort of fish on the hook and they can keep going?
Yeah. The more specific we are, the more interested we are. And if we're coming back to you with lists of questions, it's already pretty far advanced in our minds.
And that, it does show that at least that you've given, that the opportunity is strong enough that you're giving strong thought to it. This is a little different with platform research tool plays because a lot of times then you'll have a good solution and we don't have a problem that needs it at that time. And a lot of times that's more of a timing thing.
Yeah, and I think in many ways when we give feedback, I mean, we are sort of, I mean, we're very thoughtful and mindful of what specifically it is we're looking for. You know, there's this question about sort of how best to follow up with us. And there are times when, you know, we would provide feedback saying, you know, look, this is an interesting package, but as an example, you know, in this particular sort of modality or disease area, you know, the mouse model doesn't replicate in human. And so we are not going to be able to get excited on the basis of mouse data, and so you need to go into the other animal model. We would kind of actually be trying to be really thoughtful and give you feedback on those things. And I do know that like many biotech companies have to be really mindful and thoughtful about how they conserve their cash. But if you reach back to me 6 months later and want to follow up with the exact same package, I'm kind of like, well, okay, you haven't actually taken my feedback. There's no change, so you know, thank you very much. I don't actually have anything new to add. Like the fact that this mouse model doesn't replicate human has not changed in the last 6 months. So, you know, so it is really kind of, we do kind of try, we don't just give you kind of BS answers, right? We are sort of like, we need to see X, Y, Z because this is where the current scientific standard is, right, in this space.
Yeah, just jump off of that if it's okay.
Yeah.
Let me know, Chris, if I'm using too much mic time.
No, it's okay.
But yeah, so we try to have a policy. It's nice to hear this, Jennifer, that everybody gets an answer. And everybody gets a thoughtful answer that helps them guide their program, whether it's for partnership or BI or not. And this is actually quite a burden on our day-to-day, how much we have to do. And so I do, every Friday, I do Decline Fridays in the afternoon.
Oh, wow.
If you get it right,
Yeah.
Friday afternoon. But you know, it takes a certain amount of mental and emotional energy to come up with what that decline looks like and to put thought in it to say, no matter what this thing is that came in the door, how could I make it better and give input to help this company? And so we also try to do that. But I just want to lastly circle back to a point you made about personalizing the first approach. You know, as you can imagine, our inboxes are inundated. And so a lot of times I can't tell if it's a spam blast where a robot has put my first name in the to-line, or if this is a genuine partnering interest. It's such a blurry area for me now to try to decipher what it is. So if you take 2 seconds and say, "Dear Scott, congratulations on the acquisition of a mall. I have something that goes really well with that." I know, okay, this is definitely not a robot, and this is somebody who really needs one of these thoughtful replies.
So I want to get to some Q&A, but I want to do a speed round here. Right, Joyce, you mentioned timely response.
Yeah.
So, I want to go down and say, what in yours, what should we manage the expectation a timely response is? And I'll start, and then
No, go ahead.
I'll start, and then that, you know, sort of first acknowledgement within a few days, full response within a few weeks.
Yes, I agree with that, all of that. With the system that we have in place, if you either go through our Amgen BD portal or you are able to find one of us directly in the BD group, it immediately goes to the person who leads all of our triages, and we have those triage meetings every 2 weeks. So you should get a response within a month, I would say.
For us, it's a lot smaller, so we could potentially give it a little bit faster, but it's just because we don't get that many emails to begin with.
Acknowledgement or decline by Friday.
Scott, do you feel like your weekend's happy or depressed?
It usually takes a few glasses of Jack Daniels.
Decompressed.
Then I'm happy.
Again, I like honesty.
So I think we're probably on the same timeline. I think my only caveat is, and I can't really speak for other people, I'm a lot of spam, right? And so there are times when, especially if I'm in the middle of a deal, I do not open emails from names that I don't recognize. That's just sort of, and so, you know, I do think that if it's genuine request that's sent to me, if I haven't at least acknowledged the receipt of the email, it's worth it to ping me again. But I actually do get a lot of spam that's even customized, you know, so it is sort of the nature of the email world that we're in now.
I think that's a good point, is that, you know, polite reminders and asks about where we stand usually are not seen as being pushy. I mean, that's fine. I mean, it's like, and if we're busy, we'll try to be honest on that side. And I think it's also important to recognize that a month in the, I talked about a deal in 90 days or less, that was, sort of laugh at the beginning, because a month isn't that long a time in most deal flows, especially for early technologies. And so you may feel, Lance, that things just aren't, moving the pace you need them to, but honestly, they're probably moving at the pace that they will move. And there are exceptions to that. So it's a great panel. There's tons of things I could bring up as topics, but I would like to throw it out to the audience for any questions that aren't their own pitch sessions, please. But any questions you have for the panel that you'd like to bring to us? Here, yes.
Thank you, Chris, for this opportunity. Question for you from a digital health perspective. I know it's a little bit different when it comes to life science versus digital health. So what are your expectations when you're getting a pitch from companies in terms of digital health partnerships?
So the question was the expectation on what the content would be on a pitch for digital health. And I imagine that one of the first questions is like, well, what do you mean by digital health? Is this a digital therapeutic? Is it a platform play for analyzing the data? So I think being very clear about the value proposition and how you're solving our, one of the problems we have is going to be the main thing. But I know Marge, you do a lot.
So we do a lot of digital health, but what that means is the bar is set really high, right? And for us, I think Bertrand was just speaking at a recent Startup Health saying that, we have done sort of what we characterize as 12-anchor deal to cover some of the key business needs from a digital health perspective, and there's other sort of small deals that we've done. But what that means though is that when you come to me, it can't just be like this is yet another AI play, right? It has to be very specific about what it is that you're trying to accomplish, what proof of concept have you demonstrated, because we have made our bets. And so for us to make additional investments in that space, it has to actually be meaningfully different from that which we have already done, right? We don't want to do the exact same thing, right? So I think it's, you guys obviously know the space very well. It's important to kind of research your partner's deals. Actually, the fact that we've done a lot makes it really hard to pitch to us because we have seen a lot, and it is the nature of the space.
Right, yeah. I meant like more in the stage of the company and what kind of data or studies or partnerships you're looking for already present in the company so that we approach you at that time or we keep you updated. This is where we are. Is this of interest?
Well, I think part of that goes back to what Jennifer was saying earlier on, that you have to know your audience, right?
Yeah.
I think it's particularly for digital health, and although I do not cover our digital health interests, what I hear from colleagues is that often we get reach outs from companies that don't really understand what Amgen has right now, how their program or their whatever value you're bringing to the table would help what we've got already, right? I don't think we're going to start with something de novo in a disease indication that we're not in, right? So you really need to think about what programs we have that are quite advanced in the clinic already and how your value could add to that, or things that are already in the market. That's probably where we're looking for digital health, nothing at the earlier stages, I would say. Jennifer, did I address that about right?
Sorry, I want to move on to get a couple more questions. Thanks very much. Actually, so behind you, sorry, in the third row there, question. Yes.
Quick question. How are some of the ways, and I'm going to use the word work together or partner or deal or whatever, that your companies will do? I mean by, acquisition, licensing, and some type of co-development. Tell me the different methods that your companies will work.
That could probably be a whole.
I know it probably could. Yeah. But it was a quick one.
Yeah. So how many people how many companies in this panel have venture arms that can do investing?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So that's one way. So there's co-investment. There's investment there. How about incubators? Who has an incubator? Okay.
Participate.
Right. So there's just different ways where it comes to a physical location, and we're involved with them. We have the collaborator here in San Francisco. Novartis is a biome for digital health here in San Francisco. I know. So I mean, there's sponsored research, especially for early companies. What about the material transfer agreements? We'll take a compound in and test it in our own models to get some validation. So all of these things. I don't want to minimize the question. I think it's an excellent question. Unfortunately, it's a whole hour in itself.
I totally understand.
So,
One comment I could make is that I think probably this is shared. I don't know you guys so well, but we start every deal with blank sheet of paper, and we structure the deal to make sense to the two partners and what they try to achieve. If that's a license, great. That's an option, acquisition, whatever it is. We make sure that it fits that deal.
But the other piece that was brought up earlier about having a long view, I think even our corporate venture is a very different viewpoint than you'll see with traditional financial venture investing, where they're looking for a 3 to 5 year return. Most of the corporate ventures that we have a longer view and really have more the philosophy we do of building value until you see the impact to the patient, not to see the impact to the Series A investors. So that's an important point. Yes?
Yes, my name is Scott Thatcher. We're pitching a therapy in development for a rare cancer where there is no treatment and the survival is very poor. The flip side, so that sounds like the beginning of a great story, but the flip side of that is the models are very difficult to find and not validated except by our compound. So the question I'm getting to is when I send my deck to you, you said, well, you need more models, then I'll want to get into a discussion with you about what that actually means for long-term development of the drug. In other words, we can wait for the model, or we can move ahead and take the drug into the clinic. So the question is really this: how much debate do you like to have with your prospective partner after you say no, or come back in 6 months to a year with the following? If you're concerned that that really is not the right path to follow.
So there's a panel later on cancer and precision cancer and things like that. But again, I think cancer-specific oncology right now could be this whole hour on part.
Yes.
Because, and I'm not dismissing your question. I'm just saying we have 3 minutes here to cover this, but every early cancer opportunity looks the same. It looks awesome. The science is great. It's awesome. But then the problem is that we see a lot of them. I mean, especially some of the companies here, that are real, very large cancer portfolios. You want to take this in for Yeah, sorry,
I didn't realize it was a prompt.
No, I don't know. I'm overwhelmed with the size of that question.
So maybe this kind of again falls into sort of do's and don'ts, right? I think that we are fundamentally scientists by training, and we are very data driven. And so when we give feedback, we try to be very constructive. And so if you come back to us with sort of scientifically rational discussions, we will be thoughtful about the feedback that we get. I think this is a combination of some of the comments, right? And it's kind of war stories of what not to do, right? I mean, we had provided a very thoughtful decline to a company in a space where we actually went in and did due diligence. We went in, back in the days, we would go into like a physical data room and go through clinical data sets. We provided a very thoughtful decline to the company. I think that they were very offended by our decline. And to a half-page thoughtful decline about sort of some of the, flaws that we have sensitivity about with the program and why we wanted to decline the program, I got a 5-page rebuttal that copied my company's CEO, including like snide comments about how we were 15 minutes late to the due diligence visit. And clearly we did not spend enough time in the clinical data room. So like that, and I'm sorry that actually makes you guys look bad. So just, again, right, they're sort of, they're good ways to engage in a very scientifically thoughtful discussion that doesn't involve these kind of So.
And I'd say, unfortunately, there are certain biological pathways where there will be a gap in the data, and we'll take a leap of faith. And sometimes there will not be a partner that's willing to commit that risk to that. And there's just a limit in some of the understanding of biology, and sometimes it needs to wait. And I know people don't like to hear that, but in some cases it can be true.
But I think if there's some degree of target validation, obviously that's helpful. Genetic validation is very helpful. And the example that you brought up, maybe you believe that the animal model does not recapitulate, and therefore you don't think it would be worthwhile doing. Scientifically, you could also look to see if you're not going to execute on a disease model per se, because the disease model is generally not accepted to represent human disease. But if you're looking at, for example, a specific biomarker that you know at least your target, you're engaging your target, and you feel that that engagement of the target and the biomarker that you're measuring could then speak to what's going to happen in the clinic. That's also another way to get around it as well. So you don't necessarily have to cure the disease in an animal model, but if you can show target engagement, appropriate target engagement with a potent molecule, that's another way to get around things as well, scientifically.
So unfortunately, we do need to wrap up now. I want to please join me in thanking the panel for their engagement. Thank you also to the audience for your engagement and the good questions, and I hope you have a great RESI.
Great, really.
Thanks. Thank you.